The iron wheels of the stagecoach screeched to a halt, kicking up dust that swirled around the tired horses as they snorted in the late afternoon heat. Josephine Palmer clutched her worn leather satchel against her chest, her heart hammering so hard she feared it might burst right through her ribs. This was at Copper Creek, Arizona Territory, 1878, her new home, where a husband she had never met awaited her arrival. The journey from Philadelphia had been long and arduous, stealing away what little color she had in her cheeks and replacing it with a permanent pallor of exhaustion. Still, Josephine straightened her spine and adjusted her simple blue bonnet before the driver opened the door. "Madam," he said gruffly, offering a calloused hand to help her down. "Welcome to Copper Creek." Josephine's boots touched the dusty Main Street, and she took in her surroundings with wide eyes. The town was smaller than she had imagined, a single dirt road lined with wooden buildings, their facades weathered by sun and time. A few horses were hitched to posts outside what appeared to be a saloon, and a small group of men lingered on the porch of the general store. "Are you the mail-order bride?" a woman's voice called out, drawing Josephine's attention to a plump, middle-aged woman approaching with curious eyes. "Mr. Yates's bride, yes," Josephine replied, summoning a polite smile. "I'm Josephine Palmer." The woman looked her up and down, her expression shifting from curiosity to something akin to disappointment. "Well, I expected someone a bit more substantial. Spencer's got a big ranch to run." Heat crept up Josephine's neck as she became acutely aware of her slender frame and pale complexion. "I assure you, I'm quite capable of hard work, Mrs. Higgins. Martha Higgins. My husband owns the general store." The woman gestured toward the building where the men stood watching. "Spencer ain't here yet. Said he might be running late. You can wait inside the store if you'd like." Josephine nodded gratefully, retrieving her trunk from the stagecoach with the driver's help before following Mrs. Higgins toward the store. She could feel eyes on her with every step, judging her, measuring her worth against some unknown standard. Inside the general store, the cool air was a welcome relief, but the silence that fell upon her entry was not. The men who had been engaged in lively conversation moments before now stared openly at her, their expressions ranging from amusement to outright skepticism. "This here's Spencer Yates's mail-order bride, Mrs. Higgins announced, her tone suggesting she was presenting a curiosity rather than introducing a person. "That skinny little thing," one of the men said with a chuckle. "She looks like a strong wind would blow her clear to California." "Bet she's never touched a washboard in her life," another added. "Look at them soft hands." Josephine's cheeks burned with humiliation, but she kept her chin up, refusing to show how deeply their words cut. "I was a seamstress in Philadelphia," she said evenly. "I've worked with my hands since I was a child. Sewing dainty dresses ain't the same as ranch work, missy," Mrs. Higgins said, not unkindly but with a certainty that made Josephine's stomach knot. "Spencer's place is no picnic. His wife died 2 years back, leaving him with a young son and more acres than most men can handle." "I'm aware of Mr. Yates's circumstances," Josephine replied. "We've corresponded for several months." A tall man with a salt and pepper beard leaned against the counter. "Hope he knows what he's getting. No offense, miss, but out here, we need women with meat on their bones and fire in their bellies." The bell above the door jingled, and all heads turned as a man entered the store. He was taller than any man Josephine had ever seen, with broad shoulders that filled the doorway and sun-darkened skin that spoke of years working outdoors. His hat was pulled low over his eyes, but when he removed it, Josephine found herself staring into the bluest eyes she had ever seen. "Spencer," Mrs. Higgins exclaimed, "your bride's arrived." Spencer Yates's gaze swept over Josephine, taking in her travel-worn dress, her slender figure, and the defiant tilt of her chin. For a moment he said nothing, and Josephine braced herself for more disappointment. Then he crossed the room in 3 long strides and extended his hand. "Miss Palmer," he said, his voice deep and steady. "Welcome to Copper Creek. I apologize for not meeting the stage. One of my horses got caught in some barbed wire." "It's quite all right, Mr. Yates," Josephine replied, placing her hand in his. His palm was rough with calluses, but his touch was surprisingly gentle. "I understand that ranch work comes with unexpected complications." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or approval before he turned to the onlookers. "I'll be taking Miss Palmer to the ranch now. We've got the preacher coming at sundown." "Mighty quick wedding," someone muttered. "When you find what you're looking for, there's no sense in waiting," Spencer replied evenly, retrieving Josephine's trunk. "Miss Palmer and I have been corresponding for months. We know each other's minds well enough." As they stepped outside, Josephine could feel the stares of the townspeople following them. Spencer helped her into a sturdy wagon, securing her trunk in the back before climbing up beside her. "I should warn you," he said as he took the reins. "Folks around here can be set in their ways. They might not take to you right away." "I gathered as much," Josephine replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "They seem to think I'm not suited for life out here." Spencer's hands tightened on the reins. "Do you believe that?" Josephine considered the question carefully. "I believe I'm stronger than I look, Mr. Yates, and I'm willing to learn what I don't know." A small smile curved his lips. "That's all I ask," he said, and with a flick of the reins they were moving, leaving the town and its judgments behind. The ride to the ranch was long, giving Josephine time to study her future husband. Spencer Yates was not what she had expected. His letters had been straightforward and practical, outlining his needs and expectations with a clarity that had appealed to her sensible nature. But they had given no hint of the quiet intensity she sensed in him now, the careful way he navigated the rutted road, or the occasional glances he cast her way when he thought she wasn't looking. "Your son," she ventured after a while, "is he looking forward to having a mother?" Spencer's expression softened. "Samuel's 5. He doesn't remember his mother much, but he's been asking a lot of questions since I told him you were coming." "I hope I can be what he needs," Josephine said, sincerity heavy in her voice. "He needs kindness," Spencer replied. "The rest will come with time." As the wagon crested a hill, Josephine caught her first glimpse of what would be her new home. The ranch sprawled across a valley, with a large wooden house nestled against a backdrop of pine trees. Fields stretched out on either side, dotted with cattle, and a barn stood nearby, its red paint faded by the sun. "It's beautiful," she breathed. Spencer looked at her, surprise evident in his expression. "It's not much compared to Philadelphia, I'd wager." "It's open and free," Josephine replied. "In Philadelphia, the buildings press in so close you can barely see the sky. Here it feels like you can breathe." Something in Spencer's face changed, a softening around the eyes that made Josephine's heart skip a beat. "Well," he said gruffly, "I hope you'll be happy here." As they approached the house, a small figure came barreling out the front door, followed by an older woman who called out for him to slow down. "Pa, Pa," the boy shouted, his face alight with excitement. "Is that her? Is that my new ma?" Spencer brought the wagon to a halt and jumped down, lifting his son into his arms with an ease that spoke of practice. "Samuel, this is Miss Palmer. Miss Palmer, this is my son, Samuel." The boy regarded Josephine with curious eyes so like his father's that it made her breath catch. "You're pretty," he declared. "Are you gonna be my ma now?" Josephine smiled, her first genuine smile since arriving in Copper Creek. "If that's all right with you." Samuel nodded solemnly. Pa says you know how to read stories. Is that true? It is indeed, Josephine replied. I brought some books with me that I thought you might enjoy. The boy's eyes widened with delight, and Josephine felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the Arizona heat. Spencer helped her down from the wagon, his hands firm around her waist. Mrs. Cooper has been helping with Samuel since. Well, for a while now. She'll show you around the house while I take care of the horses. The older woman who had followed Samuel out of the house approached with a kind smile. Welcome to the Yates Ranch, Miss Palmer. I'm Ellen Cooper. My husband and I have the next property over. Thank you for looking after Samuel, Josephine said, genuinely grateful. He's a good boy, Mrs. Cooper replied. Takes after his father that way. As Spencer led the horses away, Josephine followed Mrs. Cooper and Samuel into the house, her new life stretching before her like an uncharted territory, full of promise and uncertainty in equal measure. The house was larger than it appeared from the outside, with a spacious kitchen and living area on the first floor and several bedrooms upstairs. It was clean but sparse, with few personal touches beyond a collection of carved wooden animals on a shelf and a quilt draped over the sofa. Spencer's not one for frills, Mrs. Cooper explained as she showed Josephine around. But he's a good man, hard-working, honest, and he dotes on that boy. His letters suggested as much, Josephine said, running her finger along the mantelpiece. He was very clear about what he expected in a wife: someone to care for Samuel, keep the house, and help with the ranch accounts. Mrs. Cooper looked at her appraisingly. And that appealed to you? Josephine thought about the life she had left behind, the endless hours hunched over fine stitching in a cramped room, the meager wages that barely covered food and lodging, the bleak future that stretched ahead with no prospect of change or advancement. It offered purpose, she said simply, and the chance to be useful beyond just surviving. Mrs. Cooper nodded, seemingly satisfied. Well, I'll leave you to get settled. The preacher should be here within the hour. I've laid out some refreshments for after the ceremony, nothing fancy, but it's perfect, Josephine assured her. Thank you for your kindness. Left alone, Josephine took a moment to catch her breath. Everything was happening so quickly. In less than an hour she would be Mrs. Spencer Yates, mistress of this house, stepmother to Samuel, and wife to a man she had only just met in person. The thought should have terrified her, but instead she felt a strange calm, as if she had been moving toward this moment her entire life. She changed into her best dress, a simple affair of pale blue cotton with a lace collar, the nicest thing she owned, and arranged her hair as best she could without help. When she came downstairs, Samuel was waiting, his face freshly scrubbed and his hair slicked down with water. Pa says you're gonna be my ma for real after the preacher comes, he said, regarding her solemnly. Josephine knelt to meet his eyes. Would you like that, Samuel? He considered the question with a seriousness that belied his 5 years. Will you read to me every night, if you'd like? And can you make apple pie? Mrs. Cooper says my real ma made the best apple pie. Josephine felt a pang of uncertainty. I've never made apple pie before, but I'm willing to learn if you'll be patient with me. Samuel nodded, apparently satisfied with this compromise. I think I'd like you to be my ma then, he declared. The sound of horses outside announced the arrival of the preacher, and moments later, Spencer entered the house, his hair damp from washing and his face freshly shaved. He had changed into a clean shirt and dark trousers, and the sight of him made Josephine's heart flutter in a way that took her by surprise. You look lovely, he said, his eyes lingering on her face. Thank you, she replied, suddenly shy. You clean up rather well yourself, Mr. Yates. The wedding ceremony was brief and simple. The preacher, a kindly older man named Reverend Davis, spoke of commitment and partnership rather than love, which Josephine appreciated for its honesty. Spencer's hands were steady as he slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, and his voice was clear as he repeated his vows. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Davis concluded. "Spencer, you may kiss your bride." Spencer hesitated, his eyes searching Josephine's face, and she realized he was giving her the chance to refuse. Instead, she stepped closer, tilting her face up to his. His kiss was gentle and brief, a promise rather than a passion, but it sent a warmth through her that lingered long after he stepped away. Mrs. Cooper had prepared a small feast, and they ate together, Spencer, Josephine, Samuel, the Coopers, and Reverend Davis, in a celebration that was modest but heartfelt. When the guests departed as dusk fell, Spencer carried a sleepy Samuel upstairs to bed, leaving Josephine alone with her thoughts. She stood at the window, watching as the last light faded from the sky, painting the landscape in shades of purple and gold. This was her home now, this house, this land, these people. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. "He went down quickly," Spencer said from behind her. All the excitement wore him out. Josephine turned to face her husband, and found him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "He's a wonderful boy," she said sincerely. Spencer nodded, a father's pride evident in his smile. "He is." He moved to stand beside her at the window. "I know this isn't what you're used to, Josephine. Philadelphia is a big city with all sorts of conveniences we don't have here." "I wasn't born in Philadelphia," she said, surprising herself with the admission. "I grew up on a small farm in Pennsylvania. My father died when I was 12 and my mother couldn't keep the farm going. We moved to the city where she had family, but—" She trailed off, the memories still painful after all these years. "But," Spencer prompted gently, "she died of influenza that first winter. I was taken in by a distant cousin who owned a dress shop. She taught me to sew and gave me work, but there was never any place that felt like home again." Josephine turned to face him fully. "I'm not afraid of hard work, Spencer, and I'm not as delicate as I look." Spencer studied her face for a long moment, his blue eyes intent. "I believe you," he said finally. "And I want you to know that I meant what I wrote in my letters. I'm looking for a partner, Josephine, not a servant. This ranch is as much yours now as it is mine." The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. "Thank you." An awkward silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken questions about the night ahead. Spencer cleared his throat. "I've prepared the room at the end of the hall for you. It gets the morning sun, which I thought you might like." Relief and something like disappointment mingled in Josephine's chest. "That's very thoughtful. I don't expect. That is, I know we're strangers yet in many ways." Spencer ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of uncertainty that made him seem younger somehow. "I'd like us to have time to know each other better before we share a room." Josephine nodded, touched by his consideration. "I'd like that too." Spencer's smile was warm and genuine. "Then I'll bid you good night, Mrs. Yates." "Good night, Mr. Yates," she replied, and watched as he climbed the stairs, her new husband, a man who was still very much a mystery to her. The following days settled into a rhythm as Josephine learned the workings of the ranch and her place within it. She rose early, preparing breakfast for Spencer before he headed out to work with his ranch hands, and spent mornings teaching Samuel his letters and numbers. The afternoons were devoted to household tasks, cooking, cleaning, mending, and in the evenings, she would sit with Spencer on the porch, discussing the day's events as the sun set over the mountains. It was a simple life, but one that Josephine found increasingly satisfying. Spencer was patient with her mistakes, teaching her how to build a proper fire in the stove and which wild plants were safe to add to their meals. Samuel was a constant delight, his curiosity and enthusiasm infectious, and Josephine found herself growing more attached to him with each passing day. But it was Spencer who occupied her thoughts most often. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentle way he handled Samuel, the strength of his hands as he worked. He was a man of few words, but the ones he spoke were thoughtful and honest. Gradually, Josephine began to see beyond the practical arrangement they had agreed upon to the man himself honorable, kind, and far more complex than his straightforward demeanor suggested. A week after their wedding, Spencer announced at breakfast that he needed to go into town for supplies. "Would you like to come?" he asked. "You could pick out some fabric for curtains. The house could use a woman's touch." Josephine hesitated, remembering the cool reception she had received upon her arrival. "Are you sure that's wise? The townspeople didn't seem particularly impressed with your choice of bride." Spencer's expression hardened. "What matters is that I'm impressed," he said firmly, "and it's time they understood that." The ride into town was pleasant, with Samuel chattering happily between them, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about the animals they passed. Josephine found herself relaxing, enjoying the simple pleasure of being out in the open air with her new family. But as they approached Copper Creek, her anxiety returned. The wagon rolled down the main street, and Josephine could feel eyes turning toward them, conversations halting mid-sentence as people recognized Spencer's wagon. "Hold your head high," Spencer murmured as he helped her down in front of the general store. "You're Mrs. Spencer Yates now, and that means something in this town." Inside the store, the same group of men who had mocked her upon her arrival stood near the counter, their conversation dying away as Spencer entered with Josephine on his arm and Samuel at his side. "Spencer," Mr. Higgins greeted from behind the counter. "Mrs. Yates, what can I do for you today?" "We need supplies," Spencer replied, handing over a list, "and Mrs. Yates would like to look at your fabrics for some curtains." Mrs. Higgins emerged from a back room, her eyebrows rising at the sight of Josephine. Well, you're still here then. Some of us had a wager you'd be on the first stage back east by now." Josephine felt Spencer stiffen beside her, but before he could speak, she stepped forward. "I'm afraid you've lost your wager, Mrs. Higgins. I find I'm quite at home on the ranch." "Is that so?" Mrs. Higgins looked skeptical. "And how are you managing the work? It's not like sewing fancy dresses, is it?" "No, it's not," Josephine agreed pleasantly. "It's far more rewarding." A surprised chuckle came from one of the men, earning him a glare from Mrs. Higgins. Spencer placed a protective hand on Josephine's back, a gesture that did not go unnoticed by the onlookers. "My wife is doing just fine," Spencer said, his voice carrying clearly through the store. "She's learning fast and working hard. Samuel adores her, and so do I." The simple declaration sent a shock of warmth through Josephine's chest. Spencer had never spoken of adoration before, and though she knew he might just be saying it to silence the gossips, the words filled her with a happiness she hadn't expected. "Well, ain't that sweet?" one of the men said, his tone somewhere between mocking and genuine surprise. Spencer Yates, smitten with his mail-order bride. "I'm not smitten," Spencer replied evenly. "I'm blessed. Josephine is intelligent, kind, and braver than anyone gives her credit for. She left everything she knew to come here, to be a mother to my son and a partner to me. That takes more strength than most of you possess." A hushed silence fell over the store. Josephine felt her cheeks flush with pleasure and embarrassment in equal measure. Never had anyone spoken of her with such admiration. "Now," Spencer continued, turning to Mr. Higgins, "about those supplies." As Mr. Higgins began gathering the items on Spencer's list, Josephine moved to the fabric section where Mrs. Higgins reluctantly showed her the available options. To her surprise, Mrs. Cooper entered the store, her face lighting up at the sight of Josephine. "Mrs. Yates, how wonderful to see you in town. Are you settling in well at the ranch?" "Very well, thank you," Josephine replied, grateful for the friendly face. Spencer thought the house could use some new curtains. Mrs. Cooper nodded approvingly. "It's about time that place had a woman's touch, and I must say, you've already worked wonders with Spencer and Samuel. I haven't seen either of them this happy in years." Mrs. Higgins sniffed. "It's early days yet. Wait till winter comes and she's snowed in for weeks with nothing but that gloomy house and a rambunctious child for company." "Actually," Josephine said, selecting a bolt of cheerful yellow fabric, "I'm looking forward to winter." Spencer mentioned that the snow makes the mountains look like they're made of spun sugar, and Samuel and I have already planned to build snow forts. Mrs. Cooper beamed. "That's the spirit. And you must join us for Christmas dinner. We always have a gathering at our place." "We'd be delighted," Josephine replied, aware that Mrs. Higgins was watching this exchange with growing discomfort, her certainty about Josephine's unsuitability clearly shaken. When they had finished their shopping, Spencer loaded their purchases into the wagon while Josephine and Samuel waited on the boardwalk. A group of women approached, curiosity evident in their expressions. "Mrs. Yates," one of them said, a tall, severe-looking woman in her 40s. "I'm Mrs. Peterson, the mayor's wife. We were wondering if you might be interested in joining our Ladies' Aid Society. We meet every Wednesday afternoon to sew quilts for the needy and discuss matters of importance to the town." Josephine blinked in surprise. "That's very kind of you to offer." "It's not kindness," Mrs. Peterson replied frankly. "We need someone with your sewing skills. Mrs. Cooper mentioned you were a professional seamstress in Philadelphia." "I was," Josephine confirmed. "Then you'll join us," Mrs. Peterson said, more a statement than a question. "Next Wednesday at the church hall." As the women moved on, Samuel tugged at Josephine's hand. "Does this mean people like you now, Ma?" The casual way he used the title made Josephine's heart swell. "I think they're starting to, sweetheart." Spencer returned, his eyes questioning as he took in Josephine's expression. "Everything all right. Mrs. Peterson just invited me to join the Ladies' Aid Society," Josephine explained, still somewhat bewildered by the turn of events. A slow smile spread across Spencer's face. "Well, well. Looks like you've won over the formidable Mrs. Peterson. That's no small feat." "I think it had more to do with Mrs. Cooper's endorsement than any merit of my own," Josephine said modestly. Spencer shook his head. "Don't sell yourself short, Josephine. People here respect hard work and honesty. They're beginning to see what I saw in your letters, a woman of substance, regardless of your size." The ride home was filled with a newfound sense of possibility. Perhaps, Josephine thought, she could find a place for herself in this community after all. That evening, after Samuel was asleep, Josephine and Spencer sat on the porch as had become their custom. The night was clear, the stars scattered like diamond dust across the velvet sky. "Thank you for what you said in the store today," Josephine said softly. "About being blessed." Spencer was quiet for a long moment. "I meant it," he finally said. "These past days, watching you with Samuel, seeing how hard you work to make this house a home, I am blessed." Josephine turned to look at him, her heart racing. "Spencer, you don't have to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I know this wasn't what either of us expected. We made a practical arrangement, and I don't want you to feel obligated to pretend it's something more." "What if I'm not pretending?" Josephine whispered. Spencer's eyes widened, and he reached across the space between their chairs to take her hand. "Josephine, I came here looking for security and purpose," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "I didn't expect to find someone like you, someone who sees me, truly sees me and values what he sees." Spencer stood, drawing her up with him. "From the moment I read your first letter, I sense something special in you. Your words were practical, yes, but there was a warmth there, a kindness that called to me." His hands framed her face, gentle and reverent. "And now, having you here, I find myself falling for the woman even more than I admired her letters." Josephine's breath caught in her throat. "I'm falling for you too," she admitted. "More every day." Spencer's smile was radiant in the moonlight. "Then perhaps it's time I moved my things into our room, Mrs. Yates." "I'd like that very much, Mr. Yates," she replied. And when he kissed her this time, it was not the chaste brush of lips they had shared at their wedding, but a deep, tender exploration that spoke of desire and devotion in equal measure. As summer gave way to autumn, Josephine found herself fully integrated into the life of the ranch and the community of Copper Creek. The Ladies' Aid Society had welcomed her skills with enthusiasm, and Mrs. Peterson, for all her initial sternness, had become a staunch ally. Even Mrs. Higgins had grudgingly admitted that Josephine had more grit than expected. But it was at home that Josephine found her greatest joy. Samuel had blossomed under her care, his natural curiosity nurtured by the books she read him and the simple science experiments she devised to entertain him on rainy days. And Spencer had become not just her husband but her confidant, her partner, and her lover. The practical arrangement they had begun with had transformed into a deep and abiding love that surprised and delighted them both. One crisp October morning, Josephine woke to find Spencer already gone from their bed, a not uncommon occurrence as ranch work often began before dawn. She dressed and made her way downstairs, expecting to find Samuel at the kitchen table waiting for his breakfast. Instead, the house was oddly quiet. A note on the table in Spencer's bold handwriting caught her eye. "Meet us in town. Noon. Wear your blue dress." Puzzled but intrigued, Josephine went about her morning chores before changing into the blue dress Spencer had specified, a new one she had made herself from fabric purchased in town, with a fitted bodice and a fuller skirt than she had ever worn in Philadelphia. She hitched up the small buggy Spencer had been teaching her to drive and set off for town, curiosity building with each mile. As she approached Copper Creek, she was surprised to see a crowd gathered in the town square. A platform had been erected, decorated with autumn leaves and ribbons, and it appeared that some sort of celebration was underway. Josephine parked the buggy and made her way toward the gathering, searching the crowd for Spencer and Samuel. A hush fell as people noticed her approach, and then the crowd parted to reveal Spencer standing on the platform, Samuel at his side, both dressed in their Sunday best. "There she is," someone whispered, and a ripple of anticipation moved through the crowd. Bewildered, Josephine approached the platform. "Spencer, what's happening?" Spencer extended his hand, helping her up onto the platform to stand beside him. "Ladies and gentlemen of Copper Creek," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the square, "many of you know that 6 months ago I sent for a bride from back east. Some of you had your doubts when she arrived, thought she was too delicate, too refined for life out here." Murmurs of acknowledgement rippled through the crowd, some sheepish, others amused. "I stand before you today to tell you how wrong those doubts were," Spencer continued. "In 6 short months, Josephine has transformed not just my home but my life and my son's life. She has worked tirelessly, learned quickly, and shown more strength of character than many who have lived here all their lives." He turned to Josephine, taking both her hands in his. "When you stepped off that stagecoach, I thought I was getting a partner, someone to share the work and help raise my son. What I didn't know was that I was meeting the love of my life, the woman who would become my whole world. Tears welled in Josephine's eyes as Spencer dropped to one knee before her, still holding her hands. Josephine Palmer Yates, I know we're already married, but we did it backward: marriage first, love after. So today, in front of this town that once doubted you but now respects you, I'm asking if you'll marry me again, not out of practicality, but out of love. A collective sigh rose from the crowd, and Josephine became aware that many of the women were wiping away tears of their own. Yes, she whispered, and then louder, yes, Spencer, with all my heart. Spencer rose to his feet, and as he kissed her, the crowd erupted in cheers. Samuel wrapped his arms around both their legs, his face glowing with happiness. I've arranged for Reverend Davis to renew our vows right here, Spencer explained when they broke apart. And then there's a celebration at the Cooper's ranch. The whole town's invited. The whole town was in on this, Josephine asked. Amazed, Spencer grinned. Even Mrs. Higgins helped with the food. As Reverend Davis took his place on the platform, Josephine looked out over the faces of the people who had once judged her so harshly and now stood ready to celebrate her love. She thought of the lonely, uncertain woman who had stepped off the stagecoach 6 months earlier, afraid but determined to make a new life for herself. That woman could never have imagined this moment, standing hand in hand with a man she adored, a child she cherished, and a community that had come to value her not despite her differences, but because of the strengths they represented. I love you, Spencer whispered as Reverend Davis began to speak. My whole world. And I love you, Josephine replied, her heart full to bursting. My home. As they renewed their vows under the clear blue Arizona sky, Josephine knew with absolute certainty that this was where she was meant to be, not as a mail-order bride seeking security, but as a beloved wife and mother who had found her place in the wild, beautiful heart of the West. Years later, when Copper Creek had grown into a proper town with a school where Josephine taught alongside her duties at the ranch, when Samuel had been joined by 2 sisters with their father's blue eyes and their mother's quiet determination, Spencer would still introduce Josephine to newcomers with the same words he had used that day in the town square. This is my wife, Josephine, the woman who is my whole world. And Josephine, her slender frame now strong from years of ranch work, her pale complexion sun-kissed from days spent in the open air, would smile and think how strange and wonderful life could be, how a practical arrangement born of necessity could blossom into the deepest love, how a town's mockery could transform into respect, and how a woman once adrift could find her home in the vast, untamed wilderness of both the Arizona Territory and a good man's heart.